COVID's on a surge. Trump's on a rampage. We still haven't officially decided the election, although that depends which part of the country or which side of the red and blue divide you're on. And COVID is forcing lockdowns or not lockdowns, even though it's the same COVID everywhere, again, depending on which side of the country you're on or whether you're red or blue. What do COVID and the election have in common? A lot more than you think. We're talking about it tonight on Rob Nelson Live. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm shooting from Jacksonville, Florida. Again, I'm here gearing up for a second town hall in January. And just so you know, I'll talk about it again at the end, but I did a town hall here where we brought an entire community together, the left, the right, BLM activists, cops, rich people, poor people, black people, white people, and we had a conversation because we're so divided. We got to start talking. And we actually had a real conversation, live stream. Some of you watched it. It was on the local news here. And we're doing more of them. We're doing another one here. We're bringing more of the actual, city officials, the sheriff, business leaders together to get some solutions. And we're doing another one that's youth. It's all young people. They're organizing it. It's young people. They're going to do it here, and they're going to have satellites across the country. It's all part of trying to have a common ground dialogue. I don't care about left, right, center. I care about the common ground because we right now are ripping ourselves apart. And I keep saying it, but it keeps becoming more and more true. And that's what tonight is all about. COVID and the election, two things that are ripping us apart. So, I sort of framed this, what do COVID and the election have in common? And actually, they have quite a bit in common and something you might not think they have in common. So let's start with it. Okay. Well, first of all, both COVID and the election are hyper divisive issues. You wouldn't think, you'd think an election would be hyper divisive. You wouldn't think a pandemic would be hyper divisive, but it is. It's hyper divisive, and it divides typically in both cases, red and blue for the most part, and even geographically, coasts, New York, California versus the middle and Florida, which is a coast, but it's the South coast. And they've created this hyper divisive split. Now, you could say why? Well, obviously politics is divisive, and Trump is probably the most divisive president we've ever had. So he's divisive, and the media is divisive and more divisive than it's ever been. And the political parties are more divisive than they've ever been. And don't put this all on Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't cause America's divisiveness. He may have exacerbated it, but so did the media. Let's be honest. I'm going to be all about being fair to both sides. Let's be honest. The media is hyper divisive. For one thing, it's in their model. They make money being divisive, right? And conflict gets viewers. They don't want everybody to just get along. Well, CNN and Fox be out of business. What happened today? Everybody got along. And tomorrow, we're back with more news. I mean, they win by dividing. They win by keeping us divided. They get more clicks. They get more views. They get more advertising dollars. And they hate Donald Trump. So, it's clear why an election divides you. This election, most divisive perhaps ever. Well, ever is a relative word. But, you can only say ever in your lifetime. So in my lifetime, most divisive that I can remember in my lifetime. And certainly the most visibly divisive, because even in the old days, maybe there were divisive elections, but they weren't amplified the way social media and our information technology allows us to amplify division. So any division is like hyper extended, and it rapidly grows. See, I get why an election is so divisive, but this one extra divisive. Now, COVID's a different story. Why is a pandemic? Why is a disease divisive? I mean, seriously, if you think about it, it is the most divisive thing that's happened in America in probably a decade at a mega level, maybe more than a decade. I mean, it's divided us in a way that's almost inconceivable. We've literally moved into sort of two camps of citizens. Those who believe that and by the way, There is a small group that thinks COVID's sort of nothing. Let's cut them out of the picture. They're like the extreme, you know? They're the tiny extreme. They don't count. Because most people, even people who don't want to do mask mandates or aren't for lockdowns, they don't think COVID's not real. They don't think it's not a real thing. Donald Trump doesn't think COVID's not real. He got it. They might minimize it. They might argue it's not as bad as they're telling you, and they make an argument for that. Okay, we've had 11 million cases, probably more because 40% of people are asymptomatic. That's a lot. It's like 3 times what you get with the flu, but we don't have a vaccine. But the death rate is, probably around 1.5%. It'll probably flatten down below that because, again, 40% of people are asymptomatic. So they don't even know they have it. We don't know how many people have it aren't tested. So, in reality, they argue, yeah, it's bad. It's horrible. I mean, it's killing people. We don't have a vaccine. But it's not even close to wiping the population out, not even remotely close. I mean, it's not great to have a 1.5% death rate in a disease. But it's not like, oh my God, most people are going to die. If I told you you're in the, you're in the 98.5 percentile, you'd be like, I'm good. So in reality, their argument is not that it's not real, that the cost of treating it like it's going to wipe us all out when it isn't is more destructive than letting us live our lives and take some chances. That's what they argue. It's a reasonable argument. You might disagree with it, but it's a perfectly reasonable argument. And people all over the world are making. Let's not forget. I mean, we like to ignore, we look at what Europe did. Look at what Germany's doing right now. Literally the last week, every day, thousands and thousands of people are out on the streets protesting. You'd think it's the BLM stuff, but it's worse. I mean, they're out protesting and the cops are out there with water cannons and blasting them back, literally blasting thousands of protesters back from the Capitol, from the Parliament building. Why? Because those people are all out there arguing that they don't want mask mandates. They don't want lockdowns. So it's not just here that people argue with some degree of confidence in their own minds that this is bad, but it's not bad enough to justify controlling everything we do. And yet this pandemic, and by the way, the other side's entitled to their view too, which is, hey, I want to be safe rather than sorry. But I got to be honest. I mean, I know people who literally are like haven't come outside barely at all for 4 or 5 months. Perfectly healthy young people. 25, 35, whatever. You haven't gone outside, you order food in. You're not going to get this and die if you go for, you're not going to, literally, they're like hibernated, like they're in a prison. And you can say, well, they don't want to get other people sick. They're not worried about getting other people sick. They're not in contact with other people. They don't want to go out and come back in. They're not going to visit grandma. They're just terrified. And I'd argue they've bought a different side of this equation, which is that this is so deadly and dangerous that we have to literally stop everything, even if that means destroying millions of businesses, millions of lives. So I get why it divides, but the hyper division goes beneath the facts. It goes to something pretty fundamental, which I would argue is a question of authority versus a distrust of authority with both the election and with COVID. Because with COVID, people distrust the authorities to tell us what to do. That's where the resistance comes from. Don't tell me what to do. And it's not just an American thing, although it is an American thing. But like I said, all over the world, there's that distrust going on. Like, I don't trust you. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the media, which represents authority certainly in most countries. And in our country, it used to be more independent, but now it's sort of the voice of one side and it's its own authority. It tells you what is and isn't. You're supposed to believe it and accept it at face value. So distrusting authority. Don't tell me, Gavin Newsom, what to do in California. Let me decide. Let us decide regionally, locally. Let us make our own choices on this thing. That's the authority issue. And the same thing applies with the election, if you think about it. Half the 72 million people voted for Donald Trump. Stop acting, if you're on the left, that it's sort of like just a handful it's half the country. And a huge number of those people, while they may not say there was like the election was stolen, they believe there was fraud. They believe that it wasn't all fair game. And they believe they distrust the authorities telling them, this is done. Listen to us. It's finished. The media told you. They're like, well, wait. We just want to look. We want to investigate. And why shouldn't they investigate? I mean, they have a right to investigate. The second thing about what COVID and the election have in common is the hypocrisy. And in both cases, there's some serious, serious hypocrisy. Reddit, keep calm. Yes, say yes, daddy. That's a name. I got drunk in Austin last night. I can't stand not taking any risks. Tried absolute isolation since late February. Okay, stay calm. Say yes, daddy. Thank you for sharing that. Let me just say, okay, yes. And I think so many people are at the point where they're like, I can't not take any more risks. I mean, I don't know how you stayed. Yes, you're staying in solitary. I don't know how you stayed in since February, but you bought the argument that that's what you had to do. First, it was to protect other people. Remember? And this is where the hypocrisy comes in. First, it was you have to, and I was in California. We had to stay in to protect others because they knew right away. Well, first, the very beginning, they weren't 100% sure, but pretty quickly they knew this is mostly going to really be bad for old people and sick people. So to protect the vulnerable, you all got to make a sacrifice. And they said it'd be a couple months. It's going to be hard. We do this together. We stand in unity. We stay home in unity. We stay strong and alone, but we save everybody. But after 3 months, they kept going. Each time something new came along, they kept extending it. Dr. Fauci said last week that this vaccine, well, we know they're estimating the Pfizer vaccine has a 95% effectiveness rate, and said this vaccine is probably 95% effective. Oh, well, I would be like, woohoo, that's awesome. That means only 5% of you who get it won't be okay. That's, again, great odds. You give me 95% chance of living, I'm feeling good. You give me 95% chance of winning the lottery, I'm feeling good. Yeah, instead of like 0.001%. And what did Fauci say? He didn't say that's awesome. He said, but you all should live as if you're not in the 95%. You should live like you're the 5%. Why would I want to live like I'm the 5% that's not going to make it? Why would you tell people that? It's the same argument. Every time things have moved forward, certain states have continued to say you got to stay locked down. Now it's not to protect other people. Now it's maybe to protect yourself, because we don't know if maybe young people could get it and die too. It has happened. Well, studies show, this is effective. This isn't effective. Whoa, we don't know. And again, my point is each time the goalpost moved. It's like Lucy and Charlie Brown pulling the football, and people bought it. And then finally we're like, wait a minute. So I appreciate keep calm and say yes, daddy. Is like, you were like, I'm doing what they told me to do for the good of myself, for the good of people around me. And suddenly you're going, well, wait a minute. And let's get to the hypocrisy then. Because here's the tricky part around the hypocrisy. The leaders you trusted are not doing what they're telling you to do. You should not need any more examples than the 3 or 4 we've had in the last couple of weeks to see that that's true. Chicago Mayor Lightfoot attends a giant celebration for Biden's victory. Right after issuing orders for people to stay home and not go out unless it's essential. Well, why does she do it? And she's got a megaphone. There's tons of people. She says, well, you know what? People were wearing masks. Well, wait a minute. No, it wasn't just wearing masks. It was social distancing. And wearing masks when you can't social distance, not one or the other. Oh, I was wearing masks so I don't have to social distance. That's not the rule. The rule is social distance, not packing a crowd. But more importantly, it's her rule, her own rule, to order Chicagoans to stay home. But she went out. Said, well, her justification, twofold. One, the rally would have happened whether I was there or not. Okay, that's some brilliant logic. Okay. They would have robbed the bank whether I did it with them or not, so I did it with them. Okay. I mean, can you literally think about an example where that makes sense? They were going to do it anyway, so I just joined them. and you could argue that for a Trump rally. Well, they were all going to have a Trump rally anyway, so we went. So we're okay. And her second rationale was, these have been tough times. We all need to just let it out sometimes and relief, get some relief. Well, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I would agree with you there, Mayor Lightfoot, but I should get to choose my own relief. If my relief's going to a Trump rally or a Biden celebration or dinner with friends or a party, why do I not get to choose my relief, but you can choose the relief you want? Because you're the mayor and you're in charge. The hypocrisy gets deeper. The mayor of D.C., Mayor Bowser, She jumped on a plane to Delaware, a state she had just restricted travel to, and again told people do not travel unless it's essential, to go for a celebration for Joe Biden's victory. Her reasoning, it was essential. Okay, well, I have my own essential travel needs. Maybe I think it's essential to go visit family somewhere. Maybe I think it's essential to go on a vacation. You don't get to tell me what my essential is. You don't get to tell me what my relaxing outlet is. But you set a rule that says I can't have those, but you can. That's hypocrisy 2. Hypocrisy 3, what many in the media have done. I mean, the Chris Cuomo one's the most obvious one. It's the most obvious one. Chris Cuomo preached relentlessly at people about COVID, and he hid in his basement. I don't mean that negatively, not Joe Biden style hiding. He quarantined in his basement. Which would be appropriate, except he didn't. He went out. He was caught out with, at a property, another property of his, with family and friends outside hanging out, no masks, when he had COVID. He was confronted by a guy, a Democrat, a big Andrew Cuomo, his older brother, who's the governor of New York, a big supporter of Cuomo. And he's like, wait, you're the CNN guy. You have COVID. You're telling us you're locked down. And what did Cuomo do? Oh, I'm so sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. You're right. I screwed up. He's like, F you. He's like, you idiot. You're a fat loser, fat bike loser. He literally called the guy names. Hypocrisy. And then he pretended to emerge from his basement on CNN. I mean, come on, guys. If you're on the left, you talk about Trump supporters buying the serum, drinking the Kool-Aid in gallons at a time when Trump says stuff. Don't buy the stuff from the Democratic leaders who do the same thing. Do you think Chris Cuomo really is walking around following mask mandates everywhere? Or Nancy Pelosi, she just happened to get caught one time with a mask down in a salon? No, of course they're not. They're not. They're not doing what they're telling you to do because they don't feel they have to. They're ordering you to do it, and they're going to do what they want. That's not how it's supposed to work. That's how it works in bad countries. That's how it worked in communist China when I lived there as a 20-something. The government told you to do one thing, they did another. That's what the Soviet Union did. That's what Eastern Europe did. That's what Cuba did. That's what Venezuela did. That's what dictators everywhere do. They tell you to do one thing and then they do another. That's what the church leaders who get caught in, I'm going to go all sides on this, who get caught in the corruption, whether it's the Catholic priests or whether it's the, evangelical, you suddenly find out was having 6 affairs and, yachts in the harbor, whatever, living off the thing, but telling you to be simple and give to the church. I mean, there's hypocrisy in leadership all the time. Don't buy the hypocrisy from your leaders, but then condemn others when they fall for it with theirs. You're just as responsible. The big hypocrisy, though, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who I've taken to calling Emperor Newsom. And I say that, honestly, because he's acting like a little emperor. And he just wants to be president. And that's fine. I don't begrudge you wanting to raise up your political, flag and get up there and get to the top. But California was the first to lock down, and it's going to be the last to unlock down. And I have seen the damage firsthand that these lockdowns are doing. And they are doing more damage than COVID did in deaths. Most people I know in California barely know someone who had COVID. Everybody knows maybe someone, or someone who knows someone. Almost nobody knows someone who died. The numbers aren't astronomically bad. They're not good. It's a disease without a vaccine. But they're literally thousands and thousands. I mean, 60% of restaurants in Southern California are going to go out of business. I mean, hundreds and thousands of businesses are going to go out of business. People's entire livelihoods have been destroyed. Millions of jobs are not coming back. I mean, people's lives are ruined. People are depressed. They're suicidal. They're drinking and doing drugs and literally wanting to blow their brains out because they can't live. And Gavin Newsom issues more orders. Just last week. New ones. We're going back to code purple. We're locking down. Like most counties. LA County, we're going back to lockdown. I'm like, wait, which part of lockdown were we not in? Like, still can't do anything you couldn't do. I don't know what they took away. It's like, what are you gonna have to take from me? But they added on some extra things for Thanksgiving. Just to be clear, our guidelines for Thanksgiving are you don't have people over. And if you do, you limit it to the number of households, and you all stay outside, and you all wear masks, and you all socially distance. And if you should dare to eat inside, which you shouldn't, you all sit far apart, and you wear masks except when you're putting food in your mouth. Not take them off at the table like you do in Florida at a restaurant, walk through with a mask, sit down with your friends, pull it off. No, you keep it and pull it back up when food's not going in. That's like what you do on the airplane, right? When I'm flying. I get it. You wear masks. I'm jammed in there. I got my mask on, double mask on in there, right? But I pull it down, I eat. Then I pull it back up. I eat some more and I pull it back up. Pull it down, eat, pull it up, right? I mean, no, that's what they told you to do. And by the way, turkey's not advised, nor is any sharing dishes. And if you are using sharing dishes, meaning a family-style plate, one server serves with one utensil. Okay, I get it. You're going COVID crazy on Thanksgiving. It's a little extreme. But maybe you believe it's necessary. So necessary that you found yourself last week, right after issuing those orders, heading out to a nice fancy dinner for one of your political lobbyists' 50th birthday. Yeah, you and a dozen plus other wonderful people gathered at a really nice French eatery where the average price of dinner is like $350 a person before drinks. So let's just say it's $1,000 a couple dinner. Well, one, F you for going and flaunting the fact that you can afford to spend $1,000, $2,000 on dinner while people you have ordered lockdown are losing their incomes, their jobs, their livelihoods, their apartments, their homes. Seriously? That alone should be a disqualifier. But worse, they're not wearing masks. They're not sitting far apart. They're technically outside in this inside closed thing that's like not really outside. How do I know this? Well, because after he got caught and offered a lame apology, which was, I did the wrong thing. I should have followed my own guidelines a little better. I guess I wasn't really thinking about it, is what he basically said. And, I should practice what I preach. Seriously, that's your answer. That is your answer? You should have, like, you knew what your guidelines were that you had just ordered. You didn't have to think very hard about whether, if those are so important, you should follow them. It's not the kind of thing where you might have somehow not realized you weren't in compliance with what you were asking people to do. You just ordered people to not behave the way you just behaved, and then blatantly went and behaved that way, knowing full well what you were doing and knowing that you thought you weren't going to get caught. But worse for Gavin Newsom is yesterday, the pictures that waitstaff had taken come out. There they all are, sitting around the table, elbow to elbow, chatting up to each other, face to face, nice enclosed space. You're supposed to only have 2 families connected, a dozen people, all different families, all going home to different places, and no masks. And by the way, I don't mean the masks were on their chins like this, like me on the airplane when I'm eating. No masks. I looked at the picture. There's no masks anywhere in sight. They took those masks off and threw them in the garbage when they walked into that restaurant. They're not hanging around their neck to pull down and pull up. There were no masks. There was no social distancing. There was no protocol of not being with people you don't know and not sharing food and airspace. You are the governor of the state that you, again, I'm pissed that you just ordered. You just ordered everyone in your state to comply with. And you are watching their lives get destroyed. And you are off high-falutin it, whatever the word is, at a $1,000 a couple dinner with friends, breaking every single rule you have and flaunting your wealth. If that isn't enough hypocrisy for every single one of you Californians, for every single Democrat to go, Gavin Newsom, get the F out of office and let somebody else in. Bring in a Democrat, but get somebody who actually will do it. But it should more importantly make you wonder just how dangerous this all is. If the guys in charge, if the women in charge are so comfortable violating the very protocols that are so essential to keep us all safe and make sure we don't all die or kill other people, because all of them have families they go back to. So I'm worked up, and I'm moving to point 3 underneath the hypocrisy, or point 3, which is the cancel culture aspect of this. But what I want to say is the other side, and let's move to 3, cancel culture. Because the side of this they both have in common is you're canceled if you say the wrong thing. I'm going to get canceled for saying this. The narrative is COVID is bad. It is. COVID will kill you. It could. Footnote, mostly old people, almost like 80% old people and sick people. But that's still bad. But the narrative is you have to do this. You have to lock down. You have to stay in. You have to wear masks everywhere. I'm not saying you shouldn't wear masks. I'm talking about California style. You have to do all these things or you will kill everybody. We are in a pandemic. This is life or death for all of us. We must do it. And if you dare to say what I just said, which is, well, wait a minute, I get it, and we should do some of that, but what about, is there another way? You're canceled. And proof of that is I'm in Florida right now, where the COVID is just as bad as it is in California. Just as bad. I mean, it's not going to get worse in some places and better in others. And California and Florida are both warm states, so it's not like picking the Northeast or North Midwest. We're in a state that has, members the first to open up. And people here are living normally. It's literally like when I was in my early 20s, I was in Berlin, East Berlin and West Berlin. East Berlin was this dark pocket separated by a wall and a half a football field from West Berlin, which is this flourishing, bright metropolis. And East Berlin was this dark, literally physically dark. Everything was simple structures and black and white and one item on the shelves, and everything was packaged in black and white. It was literally like I was walking in a black and white movie to a color movie. And I was like, how can these two worlds exist 100 yards apart? And how do the people in one world not realize how much different the other world is? Well, the people in the East Berlin world were like, we're in the good world. We're in the safe world. The world out there in West Berlin is the bad world, the dangerous world, the corrupt world. I was like, you just take a trip into that bad world and you'd realize, holy crap, it's really nice. That's what it's like, I think, with California and people who are in the lockdown and locking themselves down, and you come to Florida. You'd think you'd go left to do another universe. You're like, wait, is the same disease here? Why aren't people dropping? Why isn't everybody just falling down the steps dead? Everybody's out. Well, it's because you're all a bunch of crazy Trump supporters, but wrong. And this is my point. It's not about left and right with COVID in Florida. Liberals, conservatives, Dems, Repubs, anti-Trumpers, pro-Trumpers, BLM, police officers, everyone's doing the same thing here. We're all living in a unity, and we wear the masks, and we have practiced social distancing, and we're polite and respectful of it. So you don't have the Walmart incidents. You don't have the people coming and going bonkers because everyone's like, you want to put a mask on, I'll put one on, fine. But people are also real comfortable about it. They're sitting down in restaurants. They're going to the gym. I'm there every night. They're going out. They're interacting. They're having meetings. It's not political. There's a mutual respect, but it's the same COVID. I was at a gathering, on my way to Florida in another state that's not very lockdown-ish, and everybody there was a bunch of prominent people, like from all different parts of leadership, left and right, Democrats, Republicans, black and white, and I walked in, no one had a mask on. Well, this wasn't just a bunch of random people. I mean, we're talking, these are business leaders. This was a high-ranking military official. I'm not going to drop anything, but the equivalent of a general or an admiral or a commander in the Air Force. I mean, you're talking major players. Why wasn't everyone wearing masks? Because they weren't afraid that they had to. Not because they were Trump crazy. They have them hated Trump. Because they weren't COVID crazy. They're respectful of it. We're not dropping dead here in Florida. We're doing fine. It's no worse, maybe better in terms of the numbers. And people are living normal lives, which they're not in California. So you got to start wondering. But my point is, why when you bring it up, why when you challenge it, why when you question it, are you canceled? That's my point where the commonality is. Florida's death rate per capita is 200% of California. That is true, but almost all those deaths, monkey arms, were early. And a lot of that, Florida has a very old part of its population. A lot of people retire in Florida. So you had a lot of old people get it. Nursing homes, the whole thing. If you look at more recent death rates and hospitalization rates, Florida is not 300 or 200% of California. And by the way, it should be 10,000% given that Florida's wide open and California is almost 100% locked down. So monkey arms, that should tell you something else. The fact that California is, for the most part, most of its population centers in a massive lockdown. And it's still approximately somewhat behind Florida, but close. Whereas Florida is in a wide open state. Everything is open. Everything is open. Should tell you something. The difference between wide open and almost completely closed is not that much. And maybe it is a little more in Florida, but still it's not 50 times more, 1,000 times more, 10,000. It should be 10,000 times more given how closed California is. The lockdown doesn't work. I'm not saying we don't want to try to prevent the spread, but the lockdowns don't work. They didn't stop the spread. They were supposed to after 3 months. It never stops it because the disease is out there. And the minute you unlock people, they start spreading the disease again. So unless you want to keep people locked down forever, and even then people were still dying with it locked down. But unlocking didn't suddenly cause, a 500-fold increase in deaths in states that unlocked. Didn't happen. Barely inched up. Some didn't. Yes, Bruce.
Yeah. Hey, real quick. We got people thinking that you're a bot, so I'm putting this up. It's a recording of himself previously because there's a lot of people that are coming up. So we need to address some of the people on Reddit. I'm just being slammed.
No worries.
They think that
all right. Thank you, Bruce. No, everybody out there.
Yeah.
Bruce just showed you we're not a bot. I'm live and real. I'm just on a rant, so I apologize. Sometimes I don't see the things. So I am not a recording of myself previously. I'm live and interactive. Bruce, pop some people up. I'll interrupt myself to do it. I was getting going, I'm on a little thing. I need to find females to get with. Whoa. Okay. Keep calm and say, yes, daddy wants to get laid. Okay. Well, I can't help you with that. But again, Dr. Fauci had some great advice about that. Despite the fact that he tells everyone to stay in, he said, if you want to take the risk, it's up to you. Go for it. Again, your call on that, But again, you're going to be fine. Find someone age compatible with you that's not going to die if they have contact with you and go have fun. That's my advice. Okay. Wow. Now I'm like a relationship guy here. Let's get some other people up there, Bruce. Who else we got? Since 250,000 mostly guaranteed were at risk and knew they were at risk and thought as if everyone else is trying to protect me, I'll be careless. Though I didn't follow that right. Hold on. Those 250,000 mostly guaranteed were at risk and knew they were at risk. And though thought everyone else is trying to protect me, I'll be careless. I'm not following that comment, so I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're saying there. So the people at risk needed to be protected. We tried. The sad truth is 40% of the deaths were in nursing homes, which were completely isolated off. It didn't change anything. No, semi-charming vibe. People are dying from it and still denying its existence while dying. That's what I want to say. I don't think people are denying its existence. I don't know very many people who say COVID doesn't exist. They may be arguing that it's worth living your life and taking a risk if you get it. And it is for most people. Be honest with yourself. If you are not old and if you do not have an underlying condition, your chances of dying are minuscule. I have a friend who is an ER doctor in New York. He is a liberal. He works with kids. He is really good at what he does. And he will tell you privately, kids are fine. The chance of a kid dying of this is so infinitesimally small, it's ridiculous. He's sad, makes him sad, old people and sick people, and he's a doctor, he wants to save them. But even doctors know that while we're making a choice, and that choice is really tough because we're saving a smaller, vulnerable population and perhaps destroying a much bigger population. So, again, this notion that you think you're protecting other people, I'm just going to go back to the fact that in Florida, people are not dropping dead any more than anywhere else, perhaps slightly higher than some of the most locked down states. And yet people are living and doing their lives. I am not minimizing COVID, but some of your comments prove my point, which is the cancel culture part. You're not allowed to say it's not as bad. You're like dismissed. I'm not saying you guys are canceling me. I'm just saying the notion that you could have a different viewpoint and it could be valid. Why not? Why isn't it equally valid? If you look at the stats, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the science, as Nancy Pelosi likes to keep saying, we follow the science, which again is sort of like saying we follow the Bible, the way they put it. It's whatever the Bible says is true. Whatever science says is true. Science, again, is many things. If you follow the science, there are many things you can conclude. And one of them is that lockdowns don't appear to work very well. And I just proved that point. Another is that the death rate is very low and getting lower. And we're not even counting all the asymptomatic people, which they estimate now is half, perhaps half. The other is that mostly old and sick people die, and the number of deaths of young people, yes, you'll see a few on CNN, but it's an infinitesimally small percentage, like 0.00001. You can die, anyone can die of anything. Jimmy Stock, would I do a show in the next few weeks with more detailed facts? Sure, I'd be happy to, yeah. Mental health, I think it's a good point. Because again, my point is, again, I'm not the COVID denier. COVID's bad, but so is the consequence of the lockdowns. The mental health consequences, the physical health consequences, suicide, alcoholism, poverty. Do you know that lockdowns are going to cause massive waves of poverty that will kill people and destroy lives for decades? That's a real cost too that can be weighed against the cost of the deaths, which is a small percentage, and again, mostly older and sick people. I'm not saying it's okay that those people die, but it's not okay that millions of other people suffer 20, 30 years of devastating consequences, and in many cases, death, because poverty and hunger lead to death. Alcohol and drugs lead to death when abused. Mental health loss, mental health instability can lead to death. So there are real consequences, real human consequences to what we are doing. And it's okay to have that debate. But the fact that you get canceled if you say the other side, and my point is, well, half the country thinks that. So half the country isn't idiots just because they don't agree with you. Same is true the other way. The half the country that thinks that they should be locked down aren't idiots either. So the side that thinks you shouldn't look at the other side as idiots either. They're not idiots. There's idiots on both sides, but just because you think we should be safer and to follow the lockdown doesn't mean you're an idiot. It means you're looking at things and going, I feel these are the choices we should make. And I feel this is the right way. And I think it is worth taking the risks to protect the vulnerable, even at the cost of the greater good that people are getting hurt. That's worth it. We'll get through it. That's a valid argument. It's not mine, but it's a valid one. Both sides have a valid argument. We don't allow it to happen. And one side in particular doesn't allow the other side to have that argument. The media cancels you if you say, you're for you're not on the side of the lockdown mentality. And I'm merely saying, look at your leaders because they're not doing what they're telling you to do. That should scare you. But we're on election, we get the same cancel culture. And the cancel culture side of the election is that if you dare to say there's election fraud, you get canceled. Now, you can argue there was or wasn't fraud. You can certainly argue that it didn't change the outcome of this election. I've argued that from the beginning. I think there was fraud. I think there's always fraud. I think there was more fraud this time because we did massive mail-in ballots. It's just open to fraud. I don't think it was enough fraud to change the outcome of the election. Not even close. Although the election only was lost by like 80,000 votes in the states that matter. 80,000 votes total probably is in the collective states that are close could have gone to Trump. It's a pretty close margin when you think about it. Biden won more than that in overall votes. But I don't think there was enough fraud to change the outcome of the election. And I don't agree with Trump that the election was stolen. I think the Democrats played a better game. They knew what mail-in balloting would get. Not that it would get fraud. It would get a lot more Democrats voting. And Trump didn't do himself any favors. The guy has no capacity to unify people. He has no capacity to make anything not about himself. So while he did a lot of really good things, I think policy-wise, and for the economy, the guy just couldn't get past his own ego. He could have literally, the last 4 months were the golden opportunity for him to kind of pull people together and go, look, and he could have won a massive re-election. But he didn't do that. So that's his fault right there. He played a bad game. And he had a tough opponent, and they beat up on him for 4 years. But that said, you're still allowed to go, I think there was election fraud. And that's where the cancel culture part drives me nuts. The Eventbrite canceled the women's, it's called the Women's Mega America First March. They canceled it because of misinformation. Because the misinformation is that they think there's voter fraud. Really? GoFundMe pulled down a fundraising campaign to raise money to investigate election fraud. You can't say there was election fraud and I want to investigate it. That's misinformation. It's an opinion. And I just want to investigate that opinion. But they yanked it down. I mean, the number of cases of where people, I'll get to, so what about those who refuse to do so, but I'm not sure what you're saying they refuse to do. So tell me what, Riot Penguin, what about those who refuse to do what? The number of people who have merely wanted to talk about election fraud and for talking about it are censored is insane. I mean, Reddit started pulling down threads where people were saying there was election fraud. You should be allowed to say you think there was election fraud. First of all, there was. Whether it was enough to steal the election, we know there was fraud. There's always fraud. But you can't even say that. But truthfully, you should be able to say the election was stolen. That's not misinformation either. It's an opinion. But you certainly should be able to say there was fraud, or I want to investigate fraud. The fact that you're being canceled for having that viewpoint is dangerous and scary. And the cancellation of people, both around the election and around COVID, who say the wrong thing, it's the opinion that is not the accepted orthodoxy opinion that the mainstream narrative in the media has created. Because again, half the country is divided on both the election and COVID. So it's not the mainstream opinion of most Americans. It's the mainstream opinion of an elite group that controls a lot of information, because half the country is divided. All right, so we got somebody saying, under circumstances, the government should never be allowed to shut down the market or anything else. People decisions, not the minority controlling the few. Yeah, and I guess that, again, is the argument one side makes, which is you shouldn't be able to shut down the government. It's a control issue. It's authority versus distrust of authority, like I said earlier. Shouldn't be able to shut the country down because you want to. People should be able to make their own choices. You can argue no. Both arguments are valid, but stop saying people can't have the argument that they think they should be free to make their own choices. And truthfully, every one of you does that in your own life. Gavin Newsom did that in his own life. He ordered everyone to shut down and made his own choice to go out and have a party and violate every rule that he just said. So there is a strong argument for people to be free to choose within a reasonable parameter how to live their lives. Early on, I understood the lockdowns because they weren't sure how deadly or how dangerous or how widespread it would be and who it would affect. And that was the 3 months. But it became clear pretty quickly who was most vulnerable, who was at risk, and who wasn't. And instead of letting the not at risk go back to their lives, they ordered everyone to stay locked down. It's a fair argument to say that's not okay. You don't tell me what risks I can take with my life. I'm allowed to do it. And if you're vulnerable at risk, let's protect you. Let's throw all the resources we can to protect the vulnerable. Let's give them all the food they want at their houses. Let's pay their rent. Let's pay their utilities. Let's give them any kind of secure transportation. You could do that for 1/50th of what we're spending to lock down an entire economy and lose it. The fourth thing, the COVID and the election have in common. It is the job of the government to keep people safe. Yes, but that's the point. It is the job of first of all, you are the government. You elect the government. The government is elected to keep you safe. But at what point, Riot Penguin, do you ask, if the government's job is to keep you safe, are they actually doing what they say? You are trusting the authority to do that, and yet they are violating their own rules, which means they can't actually think they're as essential as they say. And are they keeping you safe? Maybe. Florida, no worse or not much worse than California. Florida functioning, California imploding. The keeping you safe is not literally just from a disease. And again, you are relatively almost super safe if you're not old or have an underlying condition. We can keep those vulnerable populations safe. We could spend a fortune to do it. It would be less, like I said, less than what we're already spending to keep everybody locked down. But keeping you safe also means keeping you able to have income, a job, a place to live, to not be homeless, to have food, to feed your family, to take care of yourself, to have mental health. That's safety too. So it's not just one or the other. The fourth thing they both have in common is a blind allegiance. And this goes to both sides, to what leaders tell you. So I appreciate that comment, Riot Penguin, because I do think this is about trusting the authorities. And both sides here trust the authorities. But here's where it flips. It's not right and left the same way as it is in the others, where it's cancel culture if you're on the red side of the equation, but not on the blue side. It's you're right if you're blue, you're wrong if you're red. The right, the side, the blue side, very often has trusted the authority of Donald Trump, much to the malignment and disdain and endless jabbing of the left. And understandably, they're like, whatever Trump says, you guys believe. And I see it now with certain conservative friends of mine who will not accept that the election wasn't completely stolen. I mean, it wasn't. And there's not enough fraud to offset it. Oh, you don't know that, Rob. I do kind of know that, but you can have your opinion. I'm not silencing you. But it's this blind following. Trump doesn't think the election is going to flip. Trump's playing a long game. Playing a long game because he's probably coming back in 2024. I'm predicting it now. I think he's going to announce before Biden is inaugurated that he's going to run in 2024. You watch. And he's going to build a massive media network to counter the mainstream media, both Fox and CNN, and possibly on a social platform. But the blind allegiance to what Trump says is always disturbed me, and it disturbs everyone on the left. But there's a blind allegiance the other way as well. It's a blind allegiance to what Democratic leaders have told you about COVID. It's a blind allegiance to what Democratic leaders have told you about poverty. How come every inner city that's run by Democratic leaders is a disaster zone? And so many Black Americans live in those disaster zones and have for decades with, it's like Joe Collins, who came on my show, South LA. He's 40, almost 40. South LA is as big a train wreck as it was when he was a kid and was getting shot at in drive-by shootings. It hasn't changed. It's not better. It's not cleaner. It's not safer. There's not more economic development. Why do you have blind allegiance to leaders who tell you, but we've got your best interest, we're taking care of you, when they're not taking care of you? They don't have your best interest. They're not looking out for you. So both sides have this blind allegiance. And I would argue, stop having the blind allegiance to your leaders just because they tell you something. Watch what they do for both sides. Watch what Trump does, not just what he says. Watch what Gavin Newsom, watch what Mayor Lightfoot or Mayor Bowser or Governor Whitmer in Michigan, who, again, early on in this whole thing, story got low played. Her husband tried to get a special 4th of July boat rental thing after they just told people not to go out and go to the lakes and go out on these boats if they didn't live there. But they were driving up anyway. And he asked if he could get it because he was the governor's husband. Seriously? And they recorded it. So, don't trust what your leaders tell you, especially if they're not doing what they tell you. A healthy distrust of authority is really important. So is a healthy willingness to let people say what we don't agree with. Whitney Cummings is a comedian. A lot of you probably know who she is. And I knew Whitney I knew Whitney before Whitney had made it big. And Whitney is super smart and super talented. She's also liberal. But Whitney came out, and she's got a comedy special coming out, and she came out in the day or yesterday or today and said, I don't understand why Hollywood is so anti to the right. Not why they are politically, personally, why everything they write is like F the right, why they don't want to embrace it and understand it. As writers, as artists, aren't you trying to see another point of view, was her argument. And she said, I grew up in a family where we were encouraged to see differences in viewpoints and embrace them and look at them. We learn from them. It's the same thing Vince Vaughn said when challenged about shaking hands with Trump. He said, I grew up in a family where I was taught to give more leeway to the side that I didn't agree with, not less. Don't cancel them. Actually let them in the room and listen. Not because you can agree with them, because that's how you actually, only strengthens your truth, but it also allows you to expand what is true or learn what isn't true. We don't learn anything new if we only stick to what we already know. That's the whole problem with social media and how the algorithms are designed to keep telling you and showing you what you already think and believe and want. There's no room to grow. We got to stop canceling people who don't agree with us. We got to stop trusting people just because they're in authority. And we got to start listening to each other and honestly hearing each other and having some compassion for each other. You can disagree with someone. You can radically disagree with someone. You can have two totally different worldviews with someone. And you can still care about that person. You can still engage with that person. And you can even learn from that person. That is the only way we go forward. All right. That's it. You guys, the interaction has been great. I appreciate it. Sorry to comments I didn't get to. This is my Wednesday rant show. So I love that you guys are ranting in there with me. I promise I will do a better job of trying to get those comments in. I should have a little comment person talking. May I put a bug in my ear and Bruce Crafty will talk to me and tell me what he thinks about that. Is that a good idea, Bruce? You want to do that? Maybe we'll put a bug in my ear, a thing in my ear. I can be like Chris Cuomo. Someone can talk to me.
Yeah, like the other Cuomo brother.
Exactly. We can have, because I do want to hear what you guys are saying. Sometimes here's the thing, my camera's up here, and when I look down like that, it looks like I'm not looking, I'm reading, and I am. So I try to look and boom, and it's hard, but I love your guys' interactivity. And if I'm calling you out on something, that's fine. You call me out too. I respect the differences in opinions you guys all bring to the table. I'm not right about everything. I just have an opinion. And my whole point is we should be able to have an opinion. You should be able to have a different one. And you can throw facts at me that I might not know, and I can throw facts at you that you might not know. But the whole point is that we share different opinions, and we don't have to share the same one. I learn from you guys. You learn from me. We learn from each other. It's sort of how we're going to move forward. Because, again, the other way, the alternative, is a disaster. And I'll just end with a story. It goes way back in the day. But the architect for Hitler's Nazi regime, his architect was actually one of the only people in the Nuremberg trials after World War II who wasn't sentenced to death, who was in Hitler's inner circle. And he wasn't sentenced to death because he came out. Some people said this was a calculated political move, but he came out and said, I didn't know about the extent of what was going on. I mean, he wasn't in the SS or whatever, but he was Hitler's architect, and he was really close to Hitler. And he said, but if I didn't know, it's because I didn't want to know. I looked the other way. And for that omission, I'm as guilty as the people who did it. So they sentenced him to life in prison, which then wasn't a little box cell. It was actually better than people who are locked in their apartments for COVID. He actually had a little house and stuff. And they kept him there. And he had to stay there. He could never leave. But during the course of his period before he died after that, he spent, and this again, I think this was sincere, and I base it off the people he did it with. He spent the bulk of his time and the rest of his life befriending people who he had, the Nazi regime had been so horrible and atrocious to. And one was a rabbi and one was a priest. And he became very close to both the rabbi and the priest and spent hours and hours listening and learning about Catholicism, about Christianity, about Judaism, about their way of life, about the history of the Jews, all kinds of stuff. And he felt he'd fundamentally changed by the end. And it wasn't going to get him out of prison, wasn't going to change anything. You can argue how he just did it, wasn't sincere. But the rabbi wrote about it and talked about it and said, my wife literally would like hate me at times for going to see this guy. But I was like, no, he is a changing human being because of our interaction. He is understanding. And he later wrote, not the rabbi, he later wrote, Hitler's architect, Albert Speer, later wrote a letter which he wanted published and made available, because at the time there used to still be Holocaust deniers. And he wrote a letter which he made freely available and anyone could use it, which said, as the architect of Hitler's Nazi regime, as one of Hitler's closest inner circle, I am here to tell you right now, the Holocaust happened and anybody who thinks it didn't is full of shit. And he put it out there so that any Holocaust denier could have it held up in their face by a media who would say, really? Because the guy who was right in the middle of it's telling you it happened. That alone was a positive outcome. No matter how far apart we are, there's always a way for us to come together. And if we don't do that, we're just going to rip apart, as I've said before, and we will fail. Divided, we will fail. United doesn't mean we all agree, but united means we're working together and listening to each other. And that's the only way we're going to succeed, especially in a country that's so evenly divided. Half and half, red and blue, half and half, Trump, anti-Trump, half and half, COVID, lockdown, no lockdown. I'm Rob Nelson.
Rob, wouldn't you say?
What, Bruce?
I was going to say,
right on my
Rob,
line,
wouldn't
Bruce,
you say that?
Right on my beautiful finish. What do you got for me?
Right at the end. Well, you just opened up the segue to the next show. I feel like, isn't that kind of the problem? Is that it's always left versus right? There's only two options.
Great point. So it's a great point, Bruce. Right. There's always only two options, which is why I say I don't want left, I don't want right, I don't want center, I want the common ground. But yeah, we got to get out of the binary left, right, all or nothing mindset. 100% right, Crafty. That is wisdom from the craft man. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. It's Rob Nelson Live. We'll see you on Friday.